Hello everyone, my name is Ross the Alcheminiaturist, and this is a ruined castle build. I've been to a few castles in my life, and most of them have been put together quite properly. And I've never really seen a ruined one up close. But I wanted to make one that looked like it had seen better days, and yet had been repurposed to fight in new wars and battles to come. So to start with this build, we're going to make some foamboard bricks. As I've found before, isopropyl alcohol is the best for dissolving the glue that holds paper to foamboard. I don't know why, but I've never had any luck with just straight peeling the paper off. I also decided to use my knife to help move along the peeling of the paper. Once the foamboard was stripped of its paper, I then cut the board into 1-inch tall strips. I measured before I cut, but I wasn't too worried if the strips were not fully 1 inch or just over an inch in height. Taking those strips, I then put them all together and cut them into 1/2 inch wide bricks, and cut, and cut, and cut. There were a lot of bricks left at the end of this, but as I always say, more bricks is better than less bricks. After the strips were all cut and ready to go, I loaded the foam up with some rocks into an old plastic Folgers container and gave it a good old shaky so that foam would have a more natural stone/concrete texture to them. For the base of this terrain piece, I cut a square, but you can cut whatever shape you want of the 1mm board that you have. I'm lucky to have MDF to use, but you can use foam core, plywood, or even corrugated cardboard. You want to make sure that your terrain is on a very firm yet thin piece to keep it both rigid and stable. And basically, all of those conditions can be met by the previously mentioned materials. When I placed the Pringles can on the part of 1mm board that I had, I realized it was just too tall, so I cut off about 3 inches from the bottom and then grabbed my Gorilla Glue. Using the Gorilla Glue, I glued my can to my base and then used the rock container that I had to weigh it down and let it cure for 24 hours. I then DIY'd my own spackle that I've used on this channel before. But really quick, it's flour, water, acrylic paint, and a little bit of Mod Podge. Mix it up as well as you can, or as unwell as you can. It all depends on how smooth or chunky you wish for the spackle to be. Using the mortar spackle on the foam bricks, I did a very miniature version of bricklaying to get the proper look, arrangement, as well as a nice feeling of nostalgia from when I was younger and was a bricklayer apprentice. But that's a story for another day. Once the spackle and foam was all put up, it was time to wait another 24 hours for all of it to set. I did scrape off some of the spackle, as I had gone a little fast and loose with it upon original construction, and there was absolutely no need for all of that. When the spackle was done drying, I took AK Interactive's black primer to cover the foam mortar spackle and the inside of the tower with a nice base coat. Right after, and not cleaning up my airbrush, I threw in some white primer as well, slightly mixed it up, and started a quick and dirty zenithal highlight over the tower. Not mixing the paint completely up made it so that after a while, the black-gray turned to gray, and then into a gray-white, and lastly, a white. With that, I also spot highlighted some parts of bricks to give it a little bit more depth for the next step. That next step being coloring the bricks. Again, I didn't fully clean out my airbrush, and just poured some of Vellejo's Saddle Brown, mixed it up, and got to work spraying more of the bricks with this color, and leaving some for the next one. I tried hard not to get the mortar spackle, but I also resolved that I could come back in once construction was complete and use a black paint to get it nice and uniform then. Between the two browns, Saddle Brown and Beastly Brown, I did do a quick wash and wipe of the airbrush so that there weren't two different browns mixed in together. I then loaded up the Saddle Brown, another color from Vellejo, and painted the other bricks. With the tower basically done at this point, we could call it done and move on to the thank you everybody for watching. Don't forget to give a like, comment, subscribe, and hit that notification bell if you want to be notified the next time I post a video. And as always, keep your brushes wet and your models painted. But that's not what we're doing here. We're going to continue. The next part of this is to grab a bunch of coffee stir sticks and cut off the rounded tips. Now I had a bunch of these sitting around waiting as I'm currently building a small 2-foot tall rubble obelisk that my Skaven have excavated and are now using as an above ground portion for their new city. Using these stir sticks, I first put 2 down to act as a bottom and then topped it with about 14 more sticks put on haphazardly and with more Gorilla Glue. Putting some more glue on the top of the tower, I then gently placed the wood floor on it, making sure I'm not causing too much pressure to be applied on the sticky floor, because it is still in the glue curing process, and I don't want anything to be moved too badly. I then grabbed 4 kebab skewer sticks I bought at the dollar store and glued them to the base as well as the wooden floor. These will act like they are looking like they are holding the floor more steady on this ruined tower. I broke up another stir stick so I could use it to add to the rubble on the ground. You'll see that I also have what looks like ruined stairs, and that is because it is exactly what they are. This was another part that was taken from the obelisk build, and since it wasn't finished, I decided it would look a lot nicer here as rubble. Once the Gorilla Glue was cured enough that it wasn't going to be a problem, I then took my Agrax Earthshade and a bigger brush and stained all the wood on it so that I had a nice stained look to it. You don't have to use a wash that you have. If you have wood stain in your garage or house or shed, you can definitely use that, as that's what it's for, staining wood. The mortar itself was bothering to me. I didn't like that it was the same color as the bricks. It felt like there was no different, but a little bit of sloppiness on my part. So I grabbed Pro Akryl's Coal Black, watered it down to a ratio of 1 part water, 3 parts paint, and sloppily painted it all over all of the mortar on the tower. It's not the cleanest painting, but it's not meant to be. Buildings built with bricks always have mortar sticking out, and some even have it slopped on the brickwork as well. So in all, it looks quite natural. For the very last part of this build, I grabbed my wet mud diorama texture from AK Interactive and another stir stick and slapped that stuff all over the place on the base. Honestly, I love the way that the wet mud looks on the base of this piece. It gives an old and overgrown feeling to it. Speaking of overgrown, I then grabbed my mossy fluff stuff that I have also from the dollar store and broke it apart all over the base, being careful to push some into the wet mud while it was still drying so that when it dries, the mossy fluff will stay easier. I also Gorilla Glued some of the fluff up and on the tower to give it a creeping up look as well. And with that, it was time. Thank you very much for watching this. As always, don't forget to give a like, comment, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and as always, keep your brushes wet and your models painted. Goodbye.